Hey, Chicago, what do you say? It's the CHGO Cubs Podcast. It's an off day for your Chicago Cubs before the final 3 games of the regular season. Luke Stuckmeyer, Ryan Herrera, Cody Delmendo, Kevin Wells running the 1s and 2s. And we got a lot going on today, actually. Yes, Cubs will play their final 3 games. Yes, Kyle Hendricks will pitch at least one more time for the Cubs at Wrigley Field. But will it be the final one, and how should it all go? We'll talk about that in a second. We'll talk about the big D. Rose retirement announcement. Is there any baseball comparable to what D. Rose went through in his career, or what he meant to the fans of Chicago? We'll talk about that a little bit. And if we got time, I'll reminisce a little bit about NBC Sports Chicago, CSN, Comcast Sportsnet. And if you have questions about Cubs stuff, I'll let you know. Maybe. Some stuff I won't tell you. They know a few stories you'll never know. But I digress. Let's start with Kyle Hendricks. Hendricks has his final start. I'll just say it. It's going to be his final start at Wrigley Field. I know he wants to remain.
Well, as a Cub.
As a Cub. He wants to pitch. He wants to pitch for the Cubs.
Yeah.
I don't know that will happen next year, and I think he's sort of accepted that.
Yeah.
Heard some interviews. He's 4-12 with a 6.28 ERA. I don't even want to think about this year because I've told you I thought they handled him incorrectly. I've heard him admit that it was a terrible season because he holds himself to a high standard. I want to think about the guy in 15 and 16, who was so incredible. They get him for Ryan Dempster, right?
Yeah.
And Dempster's actually in the room when they're making the trade. They had just moved those offices, and Jed and Theo, for some reason, let Dempster sit and play Golden Tee while they were trying to figure out where they were going to trade him. What? So Dempster was there when the trade went down.
Isn't that also after he blocked the trade to Atlanta,
yes.
maybe? Right?
And he was sitting there in what became kind of the offices for Marquee.
Uh-huh.
That was just a building at that time, and that's where that all went down. But in this, I don't think gets enough acknowledgement. In the Cubs' golden era, 15, 16, 17, in 15, as a young pitcher, Kyle Hendricks, 180 innings for the Cubs on that team. And in 2016, 190 innings he pitched with a 2.13 ERA.
Won the ERA title, yeah.
Forget this stuff about pitching in Game 7 and all that. Like, that tells you all you need to know about how good he was then.
Yeah. I think one other thing with Kyle, and the last few years, like, have been, like, obviously – there's been bad. I mean, 23 was a good year when he came back, right? Like, I think we can acknowledge that 23 was a good year. He did miss the first basically 2 months of the year. There's been some other injuries, obviously, for him these last few years. But I would also say, like, during that time when the Cubs were in their championship window, right, their competitive window, and they needed him to be, when he was at his best, like, obviously those were his best years, they needed him to be available. I think one of the things that gets lost is how durable he was.
Yeah.
Like 17, he pitched. He only made 24 starts. Did he get hurt that year? I would think he got hurt that year. I don't remember what it would have been, but like 15, he made 32 starts. 2016, he made 30 starts, 31 appearances. 18, he pitched 33 starts, and then 19 was another 30 starts. And then 20, which we know is the 60-game season, another 12. So once every 5 games. Like, for when they needed him, when they were in that window and they needed him to pitch and pitch well, he pitched well. And he was going out there basically every 5th day. Like, his durability was something that goes underrated for the first 6 years of his career or whatever. But I think that's super important to acknowledge, is just how he kept his body right. He did the right things to make sure he stayed on the field. Obviously, he wasn't like blowing out his elbow by trying to pitch 100-mile-per-hour pitches. Like, that wasn't part of his game, of course, but doing the things he needed to, the first half of his career to stay on the field and keep pitching ball games throughout the year. And I think that's something important for that team when they needed it.
Yeah, I mean, this guy, he surpassed any expectations that any fan ever really had. I remember when he came up in 2014, and, at that point, you're still in the rebuild, and, I remember watching him pitch, and it's not like he was blowing me away with anything. If you would have told me that he would be with the organization for another 10 years and was going to pitch in Game 7 of the World Series and be the game winner of the most important, biggest moment in Cubs history at Wrigley Field in Game 6 of the NLCS in 2016, I would have told you were crazy. So to me, that is what kind of describes what Kyle Hendricks means to me. Is he's a very Hall of Very good pitcher. He was
He's a Cubs Hall of Famer for sure.
For sure. Cubs Hall of Famer for sure. And then this is only to say how great Greg Maddux was, but he was a poor man's Greg Maddux who still put together a really good career to this point. The fact that he pitched well in every big game that he pitched in the prime of his career, and even you can even point at games at the end of last season when this team was fighting for the playoffs that he pitched well, and he was not he was absolutely a reason the team was even in the race last year when no one had any expectations for him. The guy, he doesn't pull the heartstrings on me like an Anthony Rizzo or a Kris Bryant did or a Javi Baez or John Lester, but this organization cannot be told, the story of this organization cannot be told without him, and they absolutely do not win the World Series without him. Absolutely do not. And that's not even just Game 7 or pitching in Game 6. Good teams need some extremes to happen, even the best teams. And the 2016 Cubs ended up being a 103-win team because Kyle Hendricks did what he did in 2016. No one thought he was going to be the ERA leader going into 2016. I was hoping he was going to be a solid 5 starter in 2016. Because they signed John Lackey to be like that middle-of-the-rotation guy. You know what I mean?
And you had Lester and Arrieta.
Arrieta coming off the greatest
second half
season or second half all time.
He for sure outperformed for not just 1 year, but his entire tenure with the Cubs, outperformed anything that we had ever expected. And that's honestly what makes me so mad about the slander that we've had to read about the guy this year, or whether it's in this YouTube chat, whether it's my Twitter mentions. The guy deserves grace, respect, and he deserves a very long-standing ovation when hopefully Craig Counsell takes him out in the middle of an inning or whatever to let him have his moment, because he is a big part of this franchise's history. Wasn't perfect, not going to the Hall of Fame, but he's done a lot more for this organization than a lot of other players, and that needs to be acknowledged.
He should at very least, like you said, get what Kerry Wood received.
Yeah.
Coming out at the right time, an ovation, leave the field how you want. Gary Ross said minimum 5-minute ovation from the fans. I heard him talking to the Score about what this game was going to be like, and he said, he was honest. He's like, I'm trying to prepare as if it's any other start, but I know that my emotions will be so different for this game than any other game I've ever pitched because of what he knows it most likely will be. Mm-hmm. And he said, I will always come back to Wrigley Field. I will always be a part of this organization. Chicago is he's never lived anywhere longer than he's lived Chicago, right? Think about that. Most of his life has been in Chicago. He's kind of grown up as an adult here. So I agree. He needs to come out that way when it happens. I hope they do the right thing. And
I'll take him out after the 4th inning.
That's exactly what I'm saying. Have somebody ready so that it doesn't get ugly at the wrong time. If he only pitches 4 innings, so be it. let it be 4 great innings, and let him walk off into the sunset. Now, he won't want that because Kyle, as quiet as he is one of the most competitive people I've been around in professional sports. Like, crazy competitive. That's why he wants to keep going.
It's like an unseen intensity. Like, he's intense about this game.
And you mentioned Game 7, and we know how it went against the Dodgers with him too.
Yeah.
You're talking about arguably the 2 biggest games in Cubs baseball history. 2 of the 5 for sure. No question about it, right? The reason I would want, if I had to rewrite that script, not because of the way I know how it went, if I had to write that script for Game 7 with the guys that were on that team, Hendricks is the man I would want starting the game. Why? Because there's never been a game with that much pressure on one team. Both teams actually felt it, but nothing like the Cubs were feeling, right? Who do you want out there? I want the guy who walks off and looks exactly the same after his 7th strikeout as he is after a walk. Like, Kyle Hendricks doesn't blink at anything. Yeah. And so he was the perfect guy to start that game because pressure never got to him. I saw James Colstock with a great, I haven't backed up this stat. I haven't looked it up. It sounds like it would be absolutely true. He said Hendricks has thrown nearly 25,000 pitches for the Cubs. He's had 12 wild pitches and 1 walk.
There's Kyle for you, man. That's Kyle.
That's a guy that doesn't blink.
Yeah.
It's a guy that just does it over and over and over. So he was, while you had John Lester, and there's no disrespect to Lester, while you had Lester, and you had it been Arrieta the year before, I would have said Arrieta. Yeah. But at that moment, Kyle Hendricks was the perfect guy to pitch Game 7, and history proved it. That was true.
Yeah. No, he like you've acknowledged, obviously he is not what he was 8 years ago, even 5 years ago, right? Yeah. He's not that pitcher anymore.
He's in his 30s.
Yeah, he's 33, 34 at this point. I don't expect him to ride off in the sunset. I know, like, talking to Tommy Hotovy on last Saturday, doesn't expect Kyle to call it quits. Kyle himself even talked kind of more in context of, like, I can't wait, or I'm going into the offseason, I'm going to, like, attack it with motivation, like, only talking about ways, like, he feels like he can improve himself this offseason. So I don't expect Kyle Hendricks to, like, walk away from the game after Saturday.
Right.
I would expect that unless I would expect that unless it's like a super steep drop from what he was making with the Cubs this year, that he's not back with the Cubs next season. Like, that'd be my expectation. I don't know what team, but I would feel like some team would want to would give him a shot.
As long as it's not the Cardinals or White Sox.
Yeah, there's definitely scenarios where Kyle's back. Maybe he signs a minor league deal or something like that to stay in the organization.
Say the Brewers too, because the Brewers
and the Brewers, yes,
the Brewers
you're right.
would get him back to
three
some
teams that even he probably knows don't do it.
Yeah,
but regardless of whatever the future for him looks like, I think we can sit here and, like, obviously we can reminisce here about what Kyle Hendricks was for this organization, but Saturday is going to be one of those days where, like, they're probably going to show a big tribute video for him on the video board, like what they did with Hayward a couple of years ago. I would think so. Like,
although it's different, he hasn't announced that he's,
yeah, but
not official. I think he knows it.
That's fair, but I think he knows
it.
He
would do it when he comes back. If he comes back.
Yeah, I don't know. Well, I guess we'll see, but I do think when they do take him out of the game, because unless he's throwing a no hitter, it'll probably happen. I would expect there to be a big crowd ready to give him his flowers. I think he deserves that.
I think we keep referencing, like, 2016 and all that, but, like, I mean, he had a good 5-6 year stretch there from 15 to 2020 through 2020. I mean, to be honest, if it wasn't a 60-game season, like, he could have been right up there. If he would have kept trajecting the way that he was in 2020, he could have been one of the best pitchers in baseball. I mean, he had an ERA under 3, and it was him and Yu Darvish as, like, the Cubs' top two in the rotation that year, which is crazy. That team, whether I don't count it or not, that team won the division. He was a big part of the team's success that year too. So it's just he was as consistent as you could have asked for, up until those injuries started happening in 2021.
So thank you to Kyle Hendricks. I hope it goes really well on Saturday, and I hope Cubs fans give him the ovation or ovations that he certainly deserves. Going to tell you about our friends at ZBiotics. This is a game-changing product I use before a night out with drinks. It's called pre-alcohol. Let's face it, after a night with drinks, I don't bounce back the next day the way I used to. I have to make a choice. I either have to have a great night or a great next day. That is until I found pre-alcohol. ZBiotics Pre-Alcohol Probiotic Drink is the world's first genetically engineered probiotic. It was invented by PhD scientists to tackle rough mornings after drinking. Here's how it works. When you drink, alcohol gets converted into a toxic byproduct in the gut. It's this byproduct that's to blame for your rough next day. Pre-alcohol produces an enzyme to break this byproduct down. Just remember to take ZBiotics, your first drink of the night, drink responsibly, and you'll feel your best tomorrow. Every time I have pre-alcohol before drinks, I notice the difference the next day, even after a night out. I kept hearing about pre-alcohol and wondered what it was actually like. Now I've tried it, and I believe the hype. And with their GMO technology, they will release different products that help address toxic byproducts of modern living in the gut. So go to zbiotics.com/CHGO Cubs to learn more and get 15% off your first order when you use the code, this is important, CHGO Cubs at checkout. ZBiotics is backed with a 100% money-back guarantee, so if you're unsatisfied for any reason, they'll refund your money, no questions asked.
Guys, there's baseball games today. There's Thursday Night Football, and you can have as much fun as I possibly can on Prize Picks because of all of this, all right? It's America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. Prize Picks is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Unlike other apps, on Prize Picks, it's just you against the numbers. All you do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. Get in on the daily action with your friends and become part of the Prize Picks community today. You can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. You can turn $10 into $1,000 instantly, really. And I've said this every time we do this ad. It is a free win with Caleb Williams in the month of September. A free win. All he has to do is throw 1 passing yard. And I know that first game of his career was a tough look, and it almost didn't look like he was going to get it.
Still had a passing yard.
He still did it. He still did it. He still got that 1 passing yard, all right?
Yeah, one more shot for it.
So 1 Caleb Williams passing yard gets you 1 win on Prize Picks every week in September. That's right. Only 1 yard gets you an automatic win every football weekend in September. 4 weeks of free W's, folks. Don't miss this deal on Prize Picks because it's gone when September ends. Not to quote Green Day or anything. Download the Prize Picks app today. Use code CHGO and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code CHGO on Prize Picks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. You just put $5 in and you get $50 free dollars.
Oh, yeah.
To use on the Bears this weekend or Thursday Night Football now, tonight, whatever. It's awesome. It's guaranteed. Prize Picks, run your game, brother.
Bad news before we get to other news.
Uh-oh.
The White Sox are up 7-0.
Oh,
they're going to drag this on. Poor Sean and Herb.
They are robbing the
hometown fans.
They are robbing their own fans of making history at home.
Unless they blow a 7-0 lead, and then that would be as fitting as it gets.
It's possible, but
they play the Tigers this weekend, so
they're going to lose those.
Do they go to Detroit, or is it?
They go to Detroit.
Yeah, it's at Detroit.
Yeah. And the Tigers' magic number is 2 because they just swept. So,
Crochet is pitching in Detroit. I know that.
Yeah, they pushed him back.
The Tigers,
they want to spoil it for the Tigers.
Could you imagine the White Sox went out and they're like this bad, but not even the worst at being the worst because they didn't break the loss record?
Yeah.
Can you imagine if they cost the Tigers a playoff spot after everything the Tigers have fought back in?
Yeah. That's not going to happen.
That would be insane.
That's what they're hoping for. But Sean Caselli, by the way, one final thing on Hendricks. He says Hendricks started the Cubs' last series clinching win as well, 2017, Game 5 against the Nats. We've only won 1 postseason game since then. Well said. All right.
Well said.
Hey, guys.
Another big game for Kyle Hendricks.
Yeah, it was. Speaking of big-time games, D. Rose provided the power for the Chicago Bulls, presented by the Illinois pork producer. Savor the flavor, savor the gains, and celebrate any occasion by enjoying the best pork produced by Illinois' pig farmers. The news today. D. Rose is retiring from the NBA. It does sort of feel like just yesterday he was a rookie.
Yeah.
It really does. Like they made the pick and they brought the Simeon hometown kid back. That doesn't feel that long ago. It's getting stranger and stranger to watch these guys that we saw come into town, whether it was Kane or Taves, the young guys, D. Rose, to watch them leave the game, leave Chicago, wherever it might be. We see his D. Rose shoes on the set. I would argue that in my fandom as a Chicago sports fan, I would put the D. Rose injury at the top of the list as the worst things that ever happened in Chicago sports.
Yeah.
Don't give me the Bartman game or whatever you want to call it. Don't get
worse than the double doink.
Yes.
I was at the double
Absolutely.
doink. The D. Rose injury, the moment it happened, was devastating on so many levels. Number one, because of where he's from and what he meant to the team. And they were on the verge of taking off and doing something. So I asked the question, is there any Cubs comparable? I know people say Gale Sayers for football with the injury being a problem. And I know they'll say Dick Butkus for Chicago players and what they meant. Chicago-born guys, Chelios, Olczyk. Is there a baseball comparable to D. Rose's career and what he meant?
I would think for recent Cubs history, it feels like it's got to be Kris Bryant. I know he didn't have like the level of like the ACL, obviously, that Derrick Rose, and he did win a championship, but I think we do kind of look at Kris Bryant's career as like he had those first 3-4-ish good years, great years. Obviously, MVP was one of them. Rookie of the Year was one of them. Won a ring. But then injuries kind of marred the last few years of his time with the Cubs. And then, it was a lot to do with injuries. And then you trade him away, or however it happened, you trade him away. And now he's just not the Kris Bryant we kind of remember. And that's kind of what happened to Derrick Rose, right? Like injuries took away a bunch of years of his career. Then he gets traded to New York, to the Knicks. He's been gone for a while. And while he has had some healthy years since, and obviously the 50-point game was like still one of my favorite moments of watching basketball his last few years. Like he's not the Derrick Rose we remember when he was 22 years old winning the MVP. He's just not. It's not a perfect comparison, like I said, because Kris Bryant did win a championship and he did have some great years, and it's different, a little bit different scenario, but I think to me is kind of a pretty solid comparison.
Kris Bryant's not from Chicago.
Yeah.
And one great basketball player, when he can only play 5, makes a much bigger difference than a great baseball player. But I would agree with some of the stuff you're saying. Obviously, the MVP.
Yeah. It's not apples to apples.
No.
But it's
the Rookie of the Year and sort of the way they left town.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Because some of the fan base, whether we want to admit it or not now, especially today, some of the fan base, just like with Kris Bryant, once the injury started and the game started to tail off, some of the fan base got frustrated and mad at D. Rose that he wasn't the same guy when he came back. I covered those teams where I just would,
and a lot of it's Bulls' fault.
We would ask Tibbs over and over. We just saw Derrick shooting free throws. He'll be back when he's healthy. Like, you know how many times I had that press conference?
Well, I remember
a billion in my life.
I remember people turning on him because he didn't come back in the 2012, 2013
he's soft,
season.
He's taking the money. Like, let's not forget that there's a large portion of the city that turned on him as well.
Oh, man.
I
won't today, but
no,
I haven't.
Never did. I never did.
No one holds a grudge like this guy over here holds a grudge. Right? That is one of the biggest grudges that I've held to this day. All right. The way, like, whether it's a fan base, I feel like the media, like, to just shit on the people I work with. Not all of you, but just, and none of you even actually work here. The people that I'm thinking of in the top of my head.
Let's say poop instead.
But
you can't.
The slant, not even necessarily the slander, but it's just more of like
We have to get a shot collar for him every time he does that. Teach him not to do it.
Sorry. Discourse.
Don't apologize to us.
Sorry to the people. The discourse related to that after the Rose's injuries and on his way out and stuff like that. It was toxic. I just feel like you can't blame injuries on a guy. Like you can blame injuries on why a guy has started to fall down, but the accusations, the fact that, like what you guys were saying, like a lot of it is like, he was coming off an ACL injury, you know, and before the season even started, they said that he wasn't going to be back, and then that's why I said earlier the Bulls put it out there that he might be back, and then that's when things started to go wrong, especially when he didn't actually come back and they're in the playoffs. You know what I mean? So there's a lot of things that I haven't let go from that as a fan, and it's the same thing with Kris Bryant. All started back in, even during 2018, related to contract extension stuff. It's been a year or two since Cap came on here, and I even asked him myself, like, where did all that come from and stuff? And to this day, I still don't even know if I fully believe what he's telling me. But it was a big conversation in the city related to Kris Bryant. Everyone's saying that he just wanted the money, that he didn't like Chicago, that he didn't, that he wanted to be on the West Coast. He doesn't even play on the West Coast now. Like, all of that discourse is the same stuff, in my opinion.
Now, so there's obviously some Bryant similarities. I also think there's similarities with Pryor and Wood.
Yeah.
Again, not the Rookie of the Year, MVP. They didn't reach, except for Kerry Wood's game, they never reached the level of D. Rose or Bryant for MVP. Now, Kerry Wood's game has some similarities to D. Rose exploding onto the scene, right? Like the dunk over Dragic, that some of the big shots, just the explosion to the basket. There's a similarity there. But again, there's the similarity of when they left town, when they started to get injured, people turned on those two guys. And that's some of why Kerry Wood was quiet and didn't talk to the media as much at the end. Mark Pryor is a totally different guy now, retired, than he was at the end of his Cubs tenure. At the end of his Cubs tenure, he didn't want to talk to anybody, and I know that firsthand because I tried.
Well, who's the guy we were just talking about to start the show? Kyle Hendricks is another one.
Yeah.
Not on the same level of MVP level explosiveness, but a guy who meant a lot to your organization and has a couple bad years, and you notice some of the comments in the chat. You're looking at like, man, 5 months ago your tune was entirely different. It's a reality of being a sports fan. I think it's important to keep your emotions in check sometimes and look back on the full picture view of what an athlete means to your team, rather than just saying, this guy sucks, get him out of here. Because they're human too, man. They're not robots. They see the comments. All of them do.
Yeah.
You know what I think will be the biggest sports moment of the year in Chicago? It will not be if Caleb throws 5 touchdowns. It will not be the White Sox losing more games than any team in baseball history. It will not be a Bedard goal. It will not be the Cubs missing the play. None of it. It will be the night that the Bulls, and this is inevitable, that the Bulls welcome back D. Rose to the United Center. And that will be a ticket that will be nearly impossible to get.
Should be January 4th when the Knicks are in town with Tibbs.
It should be the night they put his number in the rafters. Now, that doesn't mean I don't believe there are other people that should have their name and number in the rafters. Norm Van Leer is one. Rest in peace. Artis Gilmore's probably another. That's 2. But D. Rose, for what he meant, a Chicago guy, youngest MVP, Rookie of the Year, all that stuff, should go up there. Just remember, we sent him out. Half the people in the city sent him out with a sour taste. It shouldn't have gone that way.
Derrick Rose teams were the only teams to give this city hope for the Bulls since Jordan left 25 years ago.
He's the only other MVP in franchise history than Michael Jordan.
He's got to be up there.
Yeah.
Anyway,
he was a symbol in the city for many, many, many years, and definitely the biggest what if.
Oh, yeah, no question about it.
That's also why Pryor and Wood are there too. They were big what ifs as well.
Now, if you want a guarantee, you want Penrose Seltzer. Penrose Brewing, Geneva, Illinois. Seltzups, hard seltzers with real fruit, led by Lemon Seltzup, a national gold medal winning hard seltzer with real lemons. They created our unique twist on a lemon shake-up with a house-made hard seltzer and pureed lemons for a throwback to warm weather and county fairs. Also available is the Lemon Tee-Up, a half-and-half inspired hard seltzer. Just released this year is their Transfusion Seltzup, inspired by a popular golf cocktail with grape, ginger, and lime. That's a winning combo right there. Penrose is available at your local beverage retailer or visit Penrose's Tap Room in Geneva. For more information, go to penrosebrewing.com or follow them on social media at Penrose Brewing.
Luke, I got to tell you about Chevy as well. If you're in the market for a bigger vehicle, find savings to match at Ray Chevrolet this September because Truck and SUV Month is going on now. Head in today to shop their huge selection of new Chevy models at new low prices. Right now, take $3,000 up to $12,000 off MSRP on most new Chevy models, or cruise into fall your own way and shop over 125 of their vehicles priced under $20,000. As one of the top-selling Chevy dealers in the Midwest, you'll always be able to shop one of Chicagoland's largest Chevy inventories. Visit our partner this month, at their location on Route 12 in Fox Lake or at raychevrolet.com. And if you've heard of Ray Chevrolet, then you've also heard of Ray's Price Promise. They're guaranteed to make your next vehicle more affordable than ever with no price changing, no add-ons, and no hidden fees ever. That means the incredible prices we're talking about now, you can expect to see the very same when you shop Ray Chevy in store or online. Shop Truck and SUV Month all month long. Only a few days left in September, so make sure you get there by visiting Ray Chevrolet in Fox Lake or raychevrolet.com. They've been serving the community since 1963. Together, let's drive.
Let me tell you, Godfather, don't make me ban you from this show. You're not going to tell us what to do.
Yeah, Godfather.
Baseball show, enough Rose. We talked about how it was comparable to baseball, and we will talk D-Rose if we want to talk D-Rose.
Oh, yeah.
Respectfully, sir.
We respectfully let you say whatever you want in the chat every single night.
I'll turn that frown upside down.
For one day, if I want to sit here and celebrate one of my favorite athletes ever, I'm going to do it. So calm down.
All right. So
sorry for yelling.
Anyways, are the Reds? They had the Reds the final 3 games of the season, right? Really, the only game that matters is Kyle Hendricks and how that goes. Are the Reds more disappointing than even the Cubs are this season for their fans? And I ask this because I remember sitting in Nashville, and we had Gordon Whitmire sit down with us at the table, and I remember Gordon just going. He was just gushing over how great the Reds were going to be.
Yeah.
At that time, there was no Bellinger. The Cubs had done nothing. And he was just like, I don't think people understand how good the Reds are. He was basically saying he thought the Reds were going to win the division. Are the Reds as disappointing or more?
For me, I would say that, they're not, just because they didn't have their second best player the entire season. At that time, Matt McClain was healthy. And I think if Matt McClain was on that team, that they probably are better. And if they don't make the playoffs with Matt McClain, then sure. But the Reds have one thing the Cubs don't have, and that's a star player. What I would do to have Elly De La Cruz on the Cubs, I would do a lot of things, okay? I would do a lot of things to have Elly De La Cruz on the Cubs.
I don't want to know what those things would be.
Yeah, I can't say them live on YouTube, but I would do a lot of things to have a guy like Elly De La Cruz on the Cubs. He is a superstar player in baseball, all right? But they also, I don't know. I mean, I guess one player doesn't define if you're going to make the playoffs or not. But so in some ways, I guess you can argue that they have been more disappointing than the Cubs, but they're also the Reds. So it's they never spend any money. However, they did spend some money this last offseason. I remember at the beginning of the year when Morel was struggling, people were like, why didn't we bring back Candelario? Which was always really funny to me, because if you wanted me to put a player next to mediocre in the dictionary, I'd put Jeimer Candelario right there. I don't think he would have made a difference on this team. But, yeah, I mean, I still feel like they're a team that could, if McClain comes back next year and maybe they add some pitching. I still think they need some pitching. Like Lodolo's nice, Hunter Green's nice, but after that it's like kind of a toss-up, it feels like. But I don't know. I'm kind of in the middle with, is it more disappointing than the Cubs? The Cubs, it's a disappointment because you haven't made the playoffs since 2018. The Reds haven't made the playoffs since, 2020, 2021, something like that?
Something like that.
I just think it's another example of
I don't think
how the Cubs have wasted.
Yeah. They've actually tried to
fast-tracking this rebuild because the division is so down right now.
Yeah.
Literally, it's only the Brewers, and I didn't think the Brewers would run away with it this year like they did.
No. Yeah. I would say that they are at the most comparably disappointing, if not less disappointing. I think this Cubs team was pretty disappointing this year considering where they were at last year. And I know the Reds were, a game behind the Cubs last year, I think is where they ended up finishing. So maybe they did have some real, this team could actually, realistically make the playoffs, reasonably expect to make the playoffs. Maybe they had some of that going in this year, but what the Cubs did in going out and getting Craig Counsell, right? They brought, I know the rest of the offseason they didn't do a ton to beef up the roster, but I think you felt good about the roster coming in last year. Then you got an all-star season out of Shota Imanaga. Michael Busch does emerge as, he looks like he's the first baseman moving forward. And you're basically in the same position you're in a year ago. So, I would say probably comparably disappointing. I think both fan bases have a right to be pretty disappointed in what the team did. I know the Reds fired David Bell, so at least that front office is a little bit more disappointed in what happened than, or at least in terms of we're ready to move on, than the Cubs are with Craig Counsell. Of course, they gave him a 5-year contract, so that's not going to happen.
They're going to hire David Ross.
Can you imagine?
That's a good question.
What if Joe Madden
and then David Ross leads him to the playoffs?
David Ross's best offensive years were with the Reds.
That's fair.
But
anyway, I would say
oh man.
I would say it's probably comparably disappointing in the respective fan bases because I would think both teams went into the season with reasonable expectations to make a playoff, to be a playoff team. Shane does point out the Cubs' payroll is much higher than the Reds, so maybe that's something working against the Cubs and making them more disappointing of a season. But anyway you spin it, it's disappointing.
I've definitely leaned more that the Cubs have definitely had a more disappointing season than the Reds because it's not like the Reds are looked at as an organization year in and year out that should be not only hanging out in top 5 payroll teams. Doesn't have a fan base as passionate as the Cubs. That's not slander. That's just fact. The amount of times I've watched the Cubs and Reds play and there being more Cubs fans at Great American Ballpark is very telling. All these things, right? So whatever. I think that if you wanted to take a team from the NL Central that's more disappointing than the Cubs this year, in my opinion, it is still for sure the Cardinals. When you look at the roster that they had, the fact that they're actually worse than the Cubs. Their record's worse than the Cubs.
No, they're actually ahead of the Cubs right now.
And they have 2. Are they barely?
They're half game up.
Oh, whatever. Who cares?
Don't let the facts get in the way of a good story, Ryan. He's on a roll. Don't stop him.
Either way, you have Nolan Arenado and Paul Goldschmidt, and then you have Wilson Contreras in his prime, if you want to call it that. On top of all the young players, Mason Wynn also in the Rookie of the Year chase this year. All right, you have Lars Nootbaar. You looked at that roster going into beginning of the year. No one thought that they were going to have as bad as a year they had in 2023 again. And instead, they end up being mid like the Cubs. To me, considering the fact that their 2 superstar players are at the back end of their career, this was their last chance for them to do anything with that core, and they're not even going to make the playoffs. To me, that's a massive failure comparably to the Cubs.
Terry E with a really good comment here in the live YouTube chat.
It's any more of a failure than the Cubs for the season. Comparably, maybe, but we also knew their pitching was going to be suspect this year. The Cardinals.
Well, yeah, I could. When I'm talking about the Cardinals, I feel like I'm talking about the Cubs in many ways, but at the same time, if everything would have gone right for the Cardinals, like their front office hoped, that's a World Series caliber team. If you just look at the names on the roster,
names wise, maybe, but
a few years ago, I'd say that.
Yeah,
probably
going into 2023, that team was a World Series pick for many teams, and then they brought back the same team basically last year and added more veteran pitching.
bad veteran
And
pitching.
they should have had Jordan Walker on the roster all season, but they don't know what they're doing with him. I'm just telling you that there is more talent on that team with more star power on that team than the Cubs. And to me, that is why them not making the playoffs is a bigger disappointment than the Cubs.
That's what I'm saying. Is like I don't think I feel the same way.
That's fine. You never agree with me on anything.
I think they both stink. That's what I think.
Well, they do, but if you're talking about bigger disappointment.
I think both were pretty disappointing teams. I don't think anyone was more disappointing than the other. That's all I'm saying. Is like I think we can say that the Cubs were comparably like they're among the most disappointing teams in baseball this year.
Absolutely.
Yes.
I don't know if the Cardinals are any more disappointed than them, or the Reds as well. Same thing.
Terry E in the live YouTube chat with a good comment here. The Reds' performance this year should be a cautionary tale for Cubs fans. And on the reliance of prospects last year, the Reds' prospects looked unstoppable.
He's right.
That's fair too.
That's we could do a whole show on that. Like not counting.
You look at the Cubs prospects, like not specific. I'm talking about more on like the pitching side. You couldn't rely on Ben Braun this year because he was hurt the whole second half. Couldn't rely on Jordan Wicks because he missed basically all but 11 starts. Couldn't really rely on Hayden Wesneski the last couple months. Like you couldn't rely on your young pitching because
hurt.
We
were counting on him for the second half of the season.
Luke Little gets hurt in like early or mid July, whenever that was, right? Like you couldn't, specifically on the pitching player side, you couldn't rely on your young pitching because a lot of them got hurt. I think that's like obviously Terry's comment is accurate, but like the Cubs have their own warning they have their own cautionary tale just based on their own experience this year.
Christopher Morel never took the next step to blossom into this huge, reliable slugger. Even Michael Busch, who homered in 6 straight games, right, had moments where like the second half wasn't quite like the first half.
Sure.
I mean, overall, great rookie season, but that doesn't mean that next year you can guarantee that he's going to play at that level again. That's a little bit what I believe he's saying in this chat too. Like, just because a guy has a great rookie year doesn't mean it's going to continue that way.
Yeah.
Giovanni Soto looked unstoppable and looked like the catcher of the future before you knew it. He was playing for the White Sox.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I mean, it's just true.
It's true, yeah. Well, who's a player that you think right now that you can't rely upon that's young going into year 2?
I just can't guarantee that any of them, even
as much as I like Jordan Wicks, I think he's a good pitcher. Because he was hurt so much this year, you can't rely on this guy's taking the next step next year because he didn't earn anything this year because he didn't pitch enough.
I don't know if it's don't rely. It's just that you can't count on steady progress from any player, let alone a really young player. Like that doesn't mean you're not going to go into the season hoping those guys have good seasons, but you can't put all your hopes and wishes on it like the Cubs like to do the last few years. Like you can't just say, well, if this guy takes a step and this guy takes a step and this guy, that just doesn't happen very often.
I think that's what Brendan talks about a lot of, like wanting more certainty around a team. And this, like, I know he brought it up the other day in terms of the whole Nico thing, which we've talked about trading him versus not trading him. Brendan talks a lot about wanting more certainty. I think we look at the Cubs and like, they do have a lot of certainty with like Justin Steele feels like a certainty at this point. Shota, I know it's only been a year, but he feels like you can reasonably expect him to go into next season and repeat what he just did. There's guys on this roster that you feel some certainty about, but there are also a bunch of guys you don't have certainty when you go into next year, and you can't sit there and be like, we're going to be able to rely on this guy. He's going to give us what we need to be a better team. They can't necessarily say that about a ton of these guys because whether it's injuries or just underperformance or whatever, they do have uncertainty throughout the roster that hurts your projections going into next year.
The only position players that I feel like you can have for sure certainty on are Ian Happ, Seiya Suzuki, and Dansby Swanson and Nico Horner. Those are probably the 4 guys that you have some certainty on. And that's just to be a productive player, to play the role, put up the numbers that you've seen the last 2 to 3 years. Those are the only 4 players I feel like you can have some certainty on. And I guess Bellinger too. But even Bellinger,
if he's back,
even Bellinger, like last season, was a 4 plus WAR player, and now this year is more of a 2 WAR player because the offense wasn't nearly as good. So like maybe if he is back next year, you're hoping to get just somewhere in the middle of that, because even though his offense wasn't nearly as good as last year. It wasn't awful either, but he also didn't produce the way they needed him to produce to be a 90-win team. So that's why it's kind of up in the air for him too. So I think those 4 guys are like the only real true certainties because, I could say Michael Busch. I feel good about him next year. I also feel great about PCA next year.
Yeah, Becky points out PCA, and I think at least defensively you feel very confident what he's going to give you defensively, and he's got a higher floor because he has Gold Glove caliber defense. But with the bat, he's had a really good last couple months. But it's only been a couple months. That doesn't make a great career. That doesn't make you
a full season of it. Yeah.
Even a full season, you don't know for sure because he's so young and he just doesn't have a lot of professional baseball experience in general, not just as far as major league experience. So, again, really, really high on PCA, of course. And the last 2 months with him hitting has been eye-opening, and you really hope he can continue that because it has been very good. But that's not certainty. That's what we're talking about, just a lot of uncertainty. I
can't even say Paredes because half his season was with Tampa Bay in a different ballpark, and the other half was at Wrigley. And we haven't sugarcoated it. He hasn't been nearly as good with the Cubs as he was with the Rays, and his home and road splits are very different. So that's going to be a big question next year if he is the starting third baseman playing every single day, which I expect at this point. And that. I think he'll definitely be a step ahead of Morel next year in terms of just overall production. But is he gonna help the team be better than the next or better than this season? There is no certainty in that at all. That is why we keep talking about how this team needs a star and all this stuff. So I think you can get consistent production out of Paredes, but I just don't know for sure what that production is because it's just so different in Tampa Bay compared to the Cubs. So
I think you to not necessarily playing devil's advocate, but you do you should go into any season with some uncertainty in players because maybe it's a top prospect coming up, right? You're gonna naturally go into.
You're not coming off a World Series,
right? But say PCA next year. When I say you have some uncertainty around him, that's not a bad thing going into next year because he was your top prospect going into this year. He got a lot of major league experience this year, and just because he provides some uncertainty going into 2025, that's not bad uncertainty. You're obviously hoping he can reach certainty level, but it's not bad to go into it with him providing some uncertainty. But the best teams, and I think we see that throughout baseball, have a lot when they do have those kind of guys on the roster to start a year. They also have a lot of really good certainty around them. I think that's what we kind of look at where the best teams like the Dodgers and those kind of teams, how they separate themselves from where the Cubs are right now, is they have young guys coming up and playing every year, but they have a lot of really good certainties, established guys around them that can obviously withstand if some uncertainty starts the year.
That's true.
Is it too early to say that Matt Shaw is going to be a productive major league player next season?
Too soon to say that he will be that?
When you say productive, what do you mean by that?
I think he'll come up and be a productive player. I think he'll be a league average hitter, and I think he'll be a pretty good defender. And I don't know if he'll be here opening day, but I think he's going to play the majority of next season with the Cubs.
I think it's too soon to say that specifically because
that's
he's never
though.
played
That's
at
not
major league level.
certainty.
Yeah.
Right, but I think his numbers project, when Zip's projections come out next year, I think that will predict a good amount of certainty. We saw that with Michael Busch this year where his numbers pretty much reflected his Zips projections that were very productive.
Which is fair. It's a fair point. I think I would say it's just too early just because I wouldn't say that until he stepped on a major league field myself. Okay. Projection systems, obviously are not me. Projection systems have their however they do their numbers and stuff. For me, it's just me personally. I'd like to see a guy hit the major league field before I would say that, again, because of the whole uncertainty thing.
That doesn't mean you don't pencil him in somewhere, just like PCA is going to be in center. But
and it's not like
you're talking about certainties for next year. Steele is a certainty. Tyone, what you would get out of him would be basically a certainty. And even injuries factor into that, right? But are you going to get some good starts out of Justin Steele? Yeah, you feel pretty good about that because you've seen a long track record. Tyone, a track record. Nico, track record. Dansby, track record.
Yeah.
Young players are way harder to figure that out with.
I would
and I wouldn't I would say to Kevin, like that's not that I don't believe that he can be next year a productive player. Like he absolutely has the skills where he could be.
Just not a certainty.
Yeah, it's just not a certainty. So like I would like to see him hit a major league field for a few games before I really give a good
I'd like to see them give him a fair shake, early and often.
That's
Don't
fair,
make the same mistake with PCA. Let him come up and play. That's a hopeful.
We'll put it out there and say that I would bet that he will be a league average hitter, a 100 WRC plus player or better next year for the Cubs. I'm willing to bet that.
That'd be awesome. Yeah, that'd be.
I don't know where he's going to play at this point, and I don't know how many at bats he's going to get. But I'm willing to bet that he will do that at least. I don't know what that production looks like, but to be a league average hitter, I think that he can. I think that's a fair expectation for next year, because I don't think he'll be on the team opening day unless some crazy trades happen or whatever. But when he does make it to the majors, I do think that they are going to use him more as a utility type player, in which that will be how he gets into the game. So I think it's fair to bet or say for certain that he can be a league average hitter based off what we see in the minors, stuff like that.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think he's got the skills and he could certainly do that.
I will say for certain he is ready for Major League Baseball. Right now, today, he is ready to play in Major League Baseball. He won't. They don't have a spot for him right now. But he is ready to play in the big leagues.
Kevin is like, give me Matt Shaw.
I've seen enough, man. He's been awesson. I've seen enough.
Listen,
he's
man.
good. He's a good baseball
player.
player.
Don't get me started on this rabbit hole.
I said the same thing with PCA. I said the same thing with PCA last year. I was like, I've seen enough. He's ready for Major League Baseball.
But it didn't start out perfectly for him.
No, and it won't for any of them.
But but the problem is, like, PCA wasn't ready for Major League Baseball at that point in time last year.
Yes, he was.
Did you see him at the plate? He was not ready to face Major League pitching.
You're all going to go through that.
But
you're going
what
to
I'm
go through
saying
that
is
every year.
But at the point in time, he wasn't ready to hit Major League pitching. He was pretty overwhelmed by Major League pitching. Now, could he come up and do what he did and provide defensive replacement level, like, good defense as a defensive replacement and steal some bases? Like, sure, if you're ready in that sense. But he wasn't ready to be like a everyday Major League player last year. I think that's fair to say with PCA.
I would agree with Ryan. It was time to rip off the Band-Aid and let the process start.
And get him going. Yeah, which I agree with.
Which they all have to go through.
As soon as he came up, I was fine with it because, like, he has skills that are Major League ready that they could use on this team right now. For sure. I will certainly agree with that.
End of an era coming this weekend. If you don't know, NBC Sports Chicago goes away after Sunday, right? We talked about the new network's going to start up. So I'm giving a tip of the cap, a nod to the old employer. We launched October 1st, 2004, the original group. And a lot of those great people are still there. They're going to hopefully some of them end up at the next network and have already started to. Some of the people at the top over there have moved over there, so I feel pretty good about that. But I was thinking about how different things are now, and then I started thinking, well, wait a minute. I do see some similarities, between what we are doing and what we did at then Comcast Sportsnet back in 2004, right? Like, what are the similarities? Is everything smooth and roses all the time? No. I can remember the very first, I think they're going to show this, the very first sports night, which was the nightly show. Chuck Garfien walked off the set in the first 5 minutes of the show. We went live to him. He couldn't hear us, so he just walked away from the camera. And Pat Boyle saves the day by saying, Chuck literally just took it away. It was like everybody let out a big. So, and then you start to see the growth of what what people are doing, right? And so I am thankful for that network launching. That's how I got back to Chicago.
Yeah.
And 15 years there. So do you have any questions about, okay, I did cover the Bulls a lot during the Rose era. I covered the Blackhawks, 3 parades, the Cubs, all that stuff, Bears occasionally, and even some White Sox pre-post. Do you have any Cubs questions about, and I may not answer it, but do you have any? I was going to try and get Gail Fisher on, but I thought of it too late because I was like, Gail Fisher and we were the Cubs beat basically from 05 to until Cap came on in 09.
What was like the lunchtime show called? It was like Sports Day in the morning, Sports night at night.
Sports day.
Sports Rise was in the morning.
Sports Rise was the first one in the morning. That was the early one.
That was my introduction to you.
Yeah.
And then Sports Day was the one that aired for an hour from like 12 to 1. Yep. 12 to 12:30 and 12:30 to 1. And Sports Night.
Sports
was
Rise.
Was on at 10.
McDonald's Sports Rise.
Yeah. And Hyundai Sports Rise. Hyundai Sports Rise for a while too.
Luke, what was your favorite moment from working
Favorite moment? I mean, that's the World Series, but really it was like the people you get to work with and the moments you get to be at, right? Like I had already experienced working in other cities where I had you kind of get the starstruck stuff out of the way, right? Like I had already interviewed Michael Jordan, Scottie Pippen, Steve Kerr, some of my heroes, Shaq, Kobe, and those guys, right? Like, and the Spurs, all the Spurs players. But it's different to come home and do it in your own town, right? It just, it is. And they'll have some bumps and bruises along the way, but that original group, that network covered sports unlike it's ever been covered in this city. Now, we are now starting to cover it also, just in a totally different fashion.
Yeah.
We're covering it a different way. But Fox Sports Net, which was before NBC Sports Chicago, didn't do anything like we did at NBC Sports Chicago. We covered it all day. We had news shows going all the time.
Yeah.
I would say
we traveled everywhere in the beginning.
My favorite show they had on Comcast Sportsnet, NBC, whatever, all of it.
Yeah.
Beer Money?
I mean, Beer Money is
after Beer Money, sure.
Beer Money was always it was great rain delay cuts. That's why every time the Cubs go into rain delay, every time the Cubs go into rain delay since we started this network, ever since I started working with Luke, I will tweet, we need some Luke Stuckmeyer Beer Money content right now. All right. That's honestly why whenever I met Luke the very first day, whenever they brought us all together to put this together, I was like, you're the guy from Beer Money.
But it didn't take any it took zero preparation to do that show, whereas those sports night shows, I was writing scripts for like 4 hours straight just to get you got to write an hour-long sportscast. Yeah. It takes a long time.
Yeah.
I would say my favorite show that I would tune into the most was probably Sports Talk Chi or Sports Talk Chicago.
First Chicago Tribune Live with Dan Jiggets.
I was going to say Sports Talk.
Yeah, it used to be that.
And then Cap came along and
it changed
took over in like 2009, and it was then Sports Talk Live.
Yeah, Sports Talk Live, So.
Because the Tribune started laying off all their writers.
Yeah. So mostly. I actually
had to transition that a little bit.
I was showing a few pictures. I was in my Dropbox. I was actually trying to find an old picture with me and Derrick Rose stuff, but I actually ended up finding old pictures of me and my friend Kate from college when we got to go tour the studio or whatever.
Yeah.
And that was in 2014, I believe, in October of 2014.
Was it still Comcast Sportsnet at that point?
Yeah,
it was probably CSN at that point.
Yeah.
CSN.
We already had the Peacock logo, but we were just calling it CSN.
Hadn't changed the name yet. So you called it the studio?
Yeah, but my friend Kate was in the workings of trying to get an internship at CSN, and we went to this broadcast fair in downtown, and somehow, some way, David Kaplan invited her to the studio, and she was like, "You want to come with?" I'm like, "Yeah."
Absolutely.
So senior in college Cody, 25-year-old Cody was just like, they did that show that I just mentioned. We got to sit behind the scenes and watch it. So that's why I always think of that whenever my friend Ben, he's off set right now. He's here today. He's from Denver. He came to visit, whatever. And he's seeing the studio for the first time. So whenever he came up, I was actually thinking about that moment of being able to see CSM from behind the scenes and see how they do things. I got to watch them do that show from behind the scenes and see how things work and stuff. It was one of the coolest moments of my obviously not career, but as a student, So
it brings you back to what we get to do, cover Chicago's teams. We're the only one left. Local TV is different. I've done that too. That's 2.5 to 3 minutes to tell the sports stories of the day or talk about sports. There's no time for opinion. There's no time for a lot of stuff. Whereas if you think of what we do, it's every team. And they did too when they had the Cubs at the time. So
I would say the only show left in town is GN Sports.
Right.
And that's on at 11 o'clock at night. It's late. And also, Marquee did this for a little bit with the reporters, but I know that they're not doing that as much anymore. But you're right. I mean, local TV in the landscape of Chicago media has changed drastically. Now with NBC Sports, I mean, it's really, really changing. So
make sure you sign up to be a diehard, by the way, because diehards are the best way to experience what we're doing. Like, you get access that you don't get with other networks, other media outlets, and we're kind of like that hybrid in between. But the diehard brings us closer to you and also gives you a forum, right? Discord is one place. Once you're a diehard, you get in the Discord and you can talk to Gary Ross and Cody and everybody that's on there. I'm on Discord. Yeah, I'm on. And
he has made an account.
I've been active sometimes.
I did help Luke do technology.
But the diehard membership gives you the discounts all year long, 20% off all of our merch. That's different, right? You get 20% off all of the events. For instance, we have the Bears tailgate coming up this weekend. So that's 20% off your admission into the Bears tailgate. That adds up if you start going to all the tailgates. Friday 120 Club. And the trip to London. You would have had 20% off your trip to London if you're a diehard, right?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And all the events that will continue, I believe, in London. We have the road trip coming up to Arizona as well. The road trip to London is the 9th to the 15th in October. They're not selling tickets for that anymore, but they are for the events in London, right?
Yeah.
Diehards get all that. You get access to Ryan's newsletter, all the articles that come through. You don't miss anything.
Not even just mine. Every newsletter.
And
Bears, Bulls, Blackhawks.
Could you imagine right now
Sox.
walking into a London pub with the diehard card? The amount of respect you would get from international fans with a diehard card. Like, you can walk in with a D Rose jersey and you're going to get some respect.
Oh, yeah.
Or you could come in with a Caleb Williams jersey and you'll get some respect. But when you pull the diehard card out of your pocket and show it to somebody from across the pond, they back up a step. It's almost as if you're on fire. You're so hot. So that's what you want to do with the diehard card.
Absolutely.
Don't miss out on that. Anything else we've missed out on today?
I mean, today's the last home game at the Oakland Coliseum.
Yeah, it's true.
And I was lucky enough, I guess you can say. I guess I can say I was lucky enough to just be able to say that I can go, but it far and away the worst ballpark I've ever been to. But I did go there in 2016.
Cubs were there?
The Cubs were there. I watched Dexter Fowler and Jorge Soler hit tanks. John Lester had a revenge game. I think he pitched like 7 strong innings. August 5th, 2016. I tweeted a picture of it out earlier today. But R.I.P. and peace. The A's fans deserve better. If you want to talk about how bad Cubs ownership is, look at the A's and you'll feel better.
Or just look on the other side of town, too.
Or look at the other side of town.
It's a couple ones. Yeah. No, it is sad because Oakland has lost basically everything now. Like, Oakland is it's not like this market that like everyone wants to be at as far as like teams wise, but they do have a very
I do think they have a very
passionate fan base.
Yeah,
that's what I'm trying to say. And like they lost the Raiders. They've lost the Raiders a couple times now, but like the Raiders are in Vegas now. The Warriors moved across the bay. They're in San Francisco now, and now they're losing the A's. Like, it sucks for the fan base there because they are known as just one of the most passionate fan bases just in the country for their teams, and they lost them all. It sucks. Totally sucks for them.
We lost the Cardinals football team.
It's true.
Oh, well.
St. Louis lost their football team.
We did.
Did they?
That was one of the more funnier moments of my life.
What's his name? Kroenke.
I'm such a hater. I'm such a St. Louis hater.
They still hate Kroenke down in
no one
Missouri.
hates St. Louis like
I hate St. Louis. If you're ever questioning an Oakland Athletics and their fandom, I believe there was a couple tweets from Nightingale last night. A fan was running out of the stadium with a chair in his hand.
Oh, there was a video.
I saw the video.
They ripped it out of the thing.
Running out of the stadium with security guards chasing after him.
Yeah, I saw that.
Just let him go.
Yeah.
Just let him have it.
Yeah.
I think there's a soccer team, an Oakland soccer team that's gonna be playing in the Coliseum next year or something. But
good luck to him.
I think
it really is I had no desire to ever want to go back there after the one time going there. But it was cool to go there and knock it off the list. So I'm happy to say that I got to go there before the A's left.
Yeah.
What's the? I don't feel bad for him. I don't know anybody in Oakland. Whatever.
Luke that's like saying you don't feel bad for the Seattle fans who lost the Supersonics.
They might get them back.
Maybe.
Okay. I don't know anybody in Seattle either.
So?
Never met him.
Does this say how much of a bad person I am since I know plenty of people in St. Louis? And I laughed at the Rams left. Yeah, I still laugh at the Rams left. Like, I don't know. The fact that the Rams significantly became a better organization the moment they left St. Louis, is there irony in that? Like,
Carter Hawkins says Decatur lost the Bears.
Yeah,
that was tough.
Sure.
Decatur never recovered.
There's a sign.
They never recovered.
The Decatur Staleys.
Yeah.
Never forget.
When you go into Decatur, there's a big sign.
Chicago Whales. Isn't there Chicago Whales at some point? Is that a baseball team?
The former home.
About the Chicago Rush. Yeah, we lost our Arena League football team. We've lost things, too.
We lost the Blitz. Chicago Blitz. I went to some of those games back in the day.
They lost the Chicago Whales Federal League team.
We lost the Honey Bears.
Lost them. 2 years.
What was your favorite part of that era, Luke?
I don't know. You guys asked me to flash. I flashed back 20 years, but that's as far back as I can really, without getting too foggy.
One random question related to you and Comcast Sportsnet. What did you do with the bald cap after you dressed up like Cap?
Do you have that picture?
I still had it. I did it because I used the same one like 2 years later. The first time I dressed up, I hosted the whole show.
With the bald cap on?
With a bald cap on, dressed as David Kaplan, because I was.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Cap took a lot of vacation days. He had a lot of radio games that he was taking with ESPN or whatnot. Like, Cap was there 40% of the time, none of the time. So I did a lot of Chicago Tribune live shows. And so when it came on Halloween, I'm like, I'm dressing up as Cap. And I came in with the Malnati's pizza box. The second time I did it, my wife made me the cryo machine and the foam coming out. So I actually did get double use out of the cap.
The cap?
And do you know that somebody actually made me dressed as Cap in a cryotherapy machine? Somebody made me a bobblehead of that. I have a bobblehead of my Halloween costume. Anyways, I digress.
That's awesome.
It's probably the best bobblehead I've personally ever seen. Like, it looks exactly like me in the costume.
I personally want you to bring it in here and we can put it on the set. I think it's worthy of going on the set.
The costume?
No.
Cap?
The bobblehead.
The bobblehead I can bring in. Yeah. I'd have to dig through some boxes.
However, for Halloween, if you do want to dress up like Cap again, that would be great.
That'd be cool.
I will
then
find a way.
We can say we had Cap on the show again.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Cap. Well, you could just pretend to be Cap the entire time, and we'll just ask you hard-hitting questions.
That's right. Corey and Brendan have a show on Sunday.
Oh, yeah.
Monday, we start the recap, as Cap likes to say. We start going back through all this.
I should have said it yesterday.
Grades. I don't know if we'll start the grades on Monday. We'll just
I should have said this yesterday. Into it was our last post game of the 2024 season.
That was it.
Yeah.
Thank God. That's all I can say.
And it wasn't very fast either.
Made it to the end.
It was definitely slower than the last two seasons. That's for sure.
All right. Thanks for checking out the CHGO Cubs podcast. Back again with Brendan and Corey on Sunday. Then we're here on Monday. By the way, the off-season time will be 11:30
a.m.
Lunch hour, baby. 11:30.
Let's go.
Luke's going to get up even
Wednesday,
earlier.
Thursday.
Luke's not going to
start the caffeine drip now.
Traffic.
Oh, yeah.
Until next time, thanks for watching and fly the W.
We all silly like the mayor.